Hello, family. Enjoy this relaxing moment with Surly Tales. Remember to hit the like button, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. It means the world to us. Also, share this video with your friends and loved ones, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The skyline of Lagos shimmered in the late afternoon sun as cars honked busily along the marina. The traffic was intense, the hustle relentless, and amid the tapestry of chaos stood the imposing glass facade of Adeyemi Holdings. The company was named after its founder and CEO, Tunde Adeyemi, one of the youngest millionaires in Nigeria. Tunde's success story was a legend in the city, a man from humble beginnings who had worked his way up with sheer determination and brilliance, transforming a small import business into a conglomerate spanning West Africa. Yet behind his confident stride, bespoke suits, and charming smile, there was another legend whispered about Tunde Adeyemi. His wife's close friends, distant admirers, and even staff members often joked that the reason he carried himself with such assurance was a certain gift. Tunde's wife, Aisha, was one of the city's darlings. Her father had been a senator, her mother a highly respected entrepreneur. Aisha herself held a master's degree in economics, a supportive partner to Tunde, and a refined socialite who organized philanthropic events in their upscale Ikoyi neighborhood. People often said the couple embodied the future of African excellence: young, dynamic, philanthropic, and deeply in love. They were the kind of couple who graced the covers of magazines, inspiring others to dream bigger. Their synergy was the talk of high society gatherings and business luncheons. But every success story often has a small crack beneath its perfect veneer. In Tunde and Aisha's marriage, that crack appeared in the form of Linda Okafor, Aisha's best friend since university days. Linda was raised in Port Harcourt, had a loud, confident personality, and an arresting beauty that often left men transfixed. She was unapologetically flirtatious, the kind of woman who reveled in attention. Having spent many weekends at Tunde and Aisha's lavish parties, Linda had observed Tunde's graceful confidence, his chiseled figure, and the rumors swirling about his physical endowment. Unlike others who quietly gossiped, Linda allowed this rumor to grow into a consuming desire. It began innocently enough, a laugh here, a prolonged stare there. When Tunde would step away to attend to a phone call during a social gathering, Linda would position herself close by, craning to catch parts of his conversation, seeking any chance for a private exchange. At first, Tunde dismissed Linda's gestures as simple friendship or playfulness. After all, Linda was Aisha's closest confidant. They had once lived in the same hostel on campus, shared the same clique, and always looked out for each other. Tunde assumed Linda's flattery was a reflection of her extroverted nature. Yet, little hints told a different story. Linda's gaze lingered a second too long on his body. The warmth of her hand on his shoulder during conversation lingered in an almost suggestive manner. Aisha, absorbed in her philanthropic events and supportive of Tunde's various business expansions, was slow to notice Linda's growing obsession. She was hosting an upcoming fundraiser for a children's hospital in Lagos and spent many late evenings planning the event. At times, Linda would stay back after their planning meetings under the pretense of helping her best friend, only to find ways to slip into Tunde's presence. Those days, Tunde had other pressing matters on his mind. His conglomerate was acquiring a logistics firm that would expand operations into neighboring Ghana. Investors were demanding details, requiring Tunde to travel frequently. Tunde's phone buzzed incessantly with calls from stakeholders, bankers, and political connections. Stress weighed on him, and in fleeting moments, Linda's flirtatious remarks almost seemed like an amusing distraction. It never crossed his mind that she was orchestrating something bigger and more sinister. One late evening, after Aisha had retired early with a migraine, Linda lingered in the living room, waiting for Tunde to return from an investor dinner. She had poured herself a glass of wine, an expensive French vintage that Tunde liked to keep for special occasions. When Tunde stepped in, tie loosened and exhaustion etched on his face, Linda greeted him with a sympathetic smile. "Rough day?" she asked softly, setting down her glass. The living room's chandelier cast dancing reflections on the marble floor. Tunde exhaled deeply. You could say that again. It's like everyone wants a piece of me, especially now that the expansion is on the table. Linda's lips curled in a playful smirk, and she tossed her braids over her shoulder. I'm sure they do, she said with a mischievous sparkle in her eye, hinting at the unspoken rumor that seemed to follow him. Tunde sat down on a sofa, sighed, then stretched his arms. Linda slid closer, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. Up close, Tunde could smell her perfume, an alluring blend of jasmine and something sweet. Something about that moment felt different. The air was thick with an undercurrent he couldn't name yet. He coughed lightly, attempting to keep things cordial. You know Aisha values your friendship. Thank you for staying back to help her. For a moment, Linda's eyes flashed with an intensity Tunde hadn't seen before. I'll do anything for her, she replied, but there was an ambiguity in her tone. It almost sounded like she meant something else. He brushed it off, attributing it to Linda's usual flamboyance. But that night, after Linda bid him good night and sashayed out of the house, Tunde found himself inexplicably unsettled. He couldn't pin down why a simple, friendly interaction left him with an uneasy feeling. Maybe it was the tension in Linda's voice, or the determined way she looked at him. Meanwhile, upstairs, Aisha lay in bed, oblivious to the subtle shift unfolding in the living room below. She trusted Linda wholeheartedly, and for good reason. Linda had been by her side through heartbreaks, triumphs, academic struggles, and celebrations. She had no reason to suspect betrayal from the woman who was practically like a sister. Nor did Aisha think Tunde would ever respond to Linda's attentions. Their marriage, in her eyes, was rock solid. They had built trust through years of supporting each other's dreams. They attended the same church, contributed to each other's families, and overcame the challenges of gossiping tabloids. Aisha never entertained the idea that Linda's presence could chip away at that foundation. Yet, the cracks had begun to form. And in that quiet, plush living room, where the hum of the air conditioner was the only sound, there was a silent promise of an unfolding drama. Linda wanted Tunde, not just for his wealth, but for the magnetic energy he exuded, the rumored proof of his virility. And unbeknownst to Aisha, Linda wasn't a woman who gave up easily. She was patient, crafty, and fueled by an obsession that refused to be tamed. By the time the weekend arrived, Linda had drafted a plan. Step by step, she would set small traps, weaving herself into Tunde's emotional life, drawing him away from Aisha. She was convinced that once he sampled what she had to offer, he would never want to return. For Linda, it was not simply about Tunde's money, though that was a sweet perk. It was about possessing something that everyone else whispered about but never dared to try to own. As the sun rose over Lagos, bathing the gleaming skyscrapers in gold, Linda's determination intensified, setting the stage for the storms of desire and betrayal that were about to descend upon the Adeyemi household. In the days following that peculiar late-night conversation, Linda became more strategic. She began frequenting the Adeyemi mansion under the guise of helping Aisha finalize the Children's Hospital fundraiser. The event was only a week away, and a flurry of activity surrounded it. Caterers needed confirmation, venue logistics had to be triple-checked, and VIP invitations were still being hand-delivered. Aisha was relieved to have Linda's help, blissfully unaware of her best friend's ulterior motives. Linda started weaving her snare by taking an active interest in Tunde's business expansions. She had never shown any real enthusiasm for corporate matters, but suddenly, she was asking pointed questions. How is the Ghana acquisition shaping up? Or, what do you think about diversifying into the East African market? At first, Tunde found it mildly refreshing, his wife's best friend suddenly engaging in meaningful discussions. He assumed perhaps Linda wanted to expand her knowledge or was seeking a more professional role in the philanthropic circles she and Aisha inhabited. But it wasn't just conversation Linda was offering. She also found ways to praise Tunde, stroking his ego in subtle ways that Aisha never did so directly. Aisha, who had known Tunde for years, loved him unconditionally, but rarely felt the need to constantly flatter him. Linda, on the other hand, peppered her chats with compliments on his new haircut, his perfectly tailored suits, even the shape of his shoulders under those suits. Each remark was designed to make Tunde pause and reflect on how good it felt to be appreciated so openly. There was something else Linda banked on: Tunde's stress. His phone rang ceaselessly, staff lined up at his office to sign off documents, and a major investor threatened to pull out if the Ghana deal didn't offer immediate returns. Tunde's nights were getting shorter, his temper occasionally shorter still, and Linda positioned herself as a calming presence. She learned just when to appear with a glass of fresh juice or a joke to lighten his mood. She sent him texts like, "If you need a listening ear, I'm here." The lines blurred between friendship and something more potent. Meanwhile, Aisha was knee-deep in the fundraiser's final details. Every time Tunde and Linda shared an exchange that was a tad too intimate, an unnecessarily tight hug, a private laugh, Aisha was either on a call with a donor or reviewing the event schedule with her volunteer team. She saw the closeness, but her trusting heart rationalized it. Linda was family, practically. And Tunde? Why would he entertain any notion of infidelity? Their love had conquered bigger obstacles. A glimmer of doubt, however, was beginning to spark in Aisha. Linda was singled out by some of their mutual friends for being overly flirtatious. Women at social gatherings would sometimes tease Aisha, "Better watch Linda. She's eyeing your husband." Aisha always laughed it off, retorting that Linda was just playful by nature. Yet, late at night, those words would echo in her mind. She had once confided in Linda about a secret concern: Tunde's gift sometimes attracted unwanted attention. Aisha never dreamed Linda would be among the women paying that type of attention to Tunde. As the fundraiser day neared, Linda escalated her game. She started orchestrating small moments alone with Tunde. One afternoon, she pretended her car broke down near Tunde's office. She called him, her voice sounding distressed, and asked if he could give her a ride. Tunde, who was about to leave for a business lunch, hesitated but felt obliged. This was his wife's best friend, after all. While he drove her to her destination, Linda shifted the conversation towards more intimate topics. She asked about Tunde's childhood, his insecurities, and dreams. She listened avidly, offering supportive comments, making him feel seen in a way that the high-pressure environment of his business rarely allowed. In that car ride, Linda's hand casually brushed against Tunde's thigh as she reached for her phone. He jerked, feeling an unwelcome jolt of electricity. She apologized profusely, claiming it was accidental. The tension lingered in the air. Tunde shook it off, trying to maintain a facade of normalcy. Linda, on the other hand, smirked subtly, realizing she was getting under his skin. A day before the fundraiser, Aisha finally had a moment to breathe. Sitting on the living room couch, she flipped through the schedule of events. Tunde walked in, looking worn out from a marathon of meetings. She patted the space beside her, inviting him to sit down. "I feel like we haven't properly talked in a while," she said softly. Tunde sank down next to her, a heavy sigh escaping his lips. "I'm sorry," he murmured, placing a hand on her knee. "Work has been insane. You know I'm doing this to secure our future, right?" Aisha nodded. "I know. I just miss you. You've been so busy, and Linda's been stepping in to help with a lot of these tasks that you'd normally do with me." Tunde's eyebrows twitched with concern. "You don't mind, do you?" he asked. "She's just been supportive in my hectic schedule. Honestly, it's a relief sometimes to have someone listen without adding more demands." Aisha stiffened at his tone. "I don't demand," she countered, her voice tinged with hurt. "But I see how you two talk. People are starting to notice, Tunde." He leaned in, planting a soft kiss on her forehead. "You have nothing to worry about. Linda is your best friend. She's helping me, that's all. Trust me on this." Though Aisha tried to accept his assurances, that conversation left a bitter taste in her mouth. She had never doubted Tunde's commitment, yet an unsettling feeling was brewing. She also felt guilt for suspecting Linda. They had weathered storms together, heartbreaks, family drama, even business disappointments. Could Linda actually be up to no good? Aisha tried to brush off the thought, focusing instead on the big event that was now just hours away. Linda's plan was moving faster than anticipated. She sensed Tunde's defenses were starting to falter. The man was only human after all. Ambition and business demands had forced him into an emotional corner, and Linda was offering him an escape. She had planted seeds of discontent in small ways, highlighting how demanding Aisha could be or making Tunde question whether his wife truly understood the full burden of his responsibilities. But Linda also knew she had to time her next move perfectly. If she made a premature advance, Tunde might retreat. So she smiled to herself, waiting for the fundraiser night, where she had planned a grand gesture that would either set her conquest in motion or break her illusions entirely. The city's elite were already buzzing about the event, and Linda planned to make sure Tunde was the center of attention, her attention. As the final preparations for the fundraiser wound down, the Adeyemi household buzzed with excitement and nerves. The caterers brought in trays of small chops and sweet jollof rice, florists brought in lush arrangements, and a famous Afrobeat singer was booked to perform. Aisha stood in the foyer checking off last-minute details, oblivious to the silent war raging in Linda's mind. In the shadows of Tunde's success and the glow of Aisha's philanthropic passion, a storm of betrayal was quietly taking shape, ready to erupt on the night that was meant to highlight their unity and generosity to the world. The night of the fundraiser arrived with all the pomp and pageantry one would expect of a high-society Lagos event. The venue was a grand ballroom in a newly built luxury hotel overlooking the Lagos Lagoon. Photographers clustered outside, eager to catch glimpses of dignitaries, celebrities, and business magnates stepping out of sleek black SUVs. The red carpet shimmered under spotlights, and journalists buzzed with excitement, anticipating who might grace their camera lenses next. Inside, the ballroom was a sea of elegance. The decor mirrored Aisha's refined taste. Gold and cream draperies cascaded from the high ceilings, tall centerpieces of tropical flowers adorned each table, and the wafting aroma of Nigerian delicacies mingled with continental dishes. A soft Afro-jazz tune filled the air, courtesy of a live band. Aisha glided through the crowd in a beautifully embroidered lace gown that reflected her northern Nigerian heritage, greeting guests and receiving compliments on her impeccable event planning. She smiled warmly, though an undercurrent of tension simmered in her heart, born from the swirl of speculation about Linda and Tunde. Yet, she maintained composure, determined to see this event through successfully. It was, after all, for a noble cause. On the other side of the room, Linda made her entrance in a figure-hugging, vibrant ochre gown, tailored to accentuate every curve. She had chosen bold, exotic prints that commanded attention, her makeup flawlessly highlighting her high cheekbones and full lips. Whispers followed her like a trailing perfume. Men stole glances at her, and women eyed her with either admiration or caution. Linda drank in the attention, a playful smile tugging at her lips. Tonight was the night she intended to tilt Tunde's gaze entirely in her direction. Tunde arrived moments later, flanked by 2 associates from his office. Dressed in a finely tailored suit, he exuded the confidence of a CEO who was used to commanding rooms. Cameras flashed the moment he stepped onto the red carpet. In typical fashion, Tunde paused to chat briefly with the press, praising his wife's dedication to the cause and dropping hints of his upcoming expansions. After fulfilling his press obligations, Tunde entered the ballroom, scanning for Aisha. When he spotted her engaged in conversation with a donor, he patiently waited. Before he could approach, Linda emerged at his side, linking her arm through his in a friendly, albeit possessive gesture. "Tunde, darling," she purred, her eyes bright with anticipation. "I've been looking forward to seeing you tonight. Doesn't it all look wonderful?" She gestured around the room. He smiled politely, extricating his arm gently. "Yes, Aisha really outdid herself. She's been planning this for months." Linda pretended not to notice his subtle move away. "I contributed a few ideas," she said, her tone almost proud. "I just hope the event raises enough funds for the children's hospital." She paused, letting her eyes roam over him. "You look dashing tonight. I'm sure Aisha must be proud to have such a handsome husband." Tunde managed a curt nod, acknowledging her flattery but hoping Aisha wouldn't see Linda's closeness. The mention of Aisha's name reminded him where his loyalty truly lay. Yet, Linda remained by his side like a second shadow, accompanying him as he made the rounds, greeting prominent politicians and business partners. As the evening progressed, Guests settled around round tables. Speeches commenced. Aisha stood behind a podium, articulating her passion for improving healthcare access for children in underserved communities. Her eloquence moved the audience, earning a standing ovation when she finished. Tunde clapped the loudest, pride radiating from his eyes. Aisha's luminous presence was a stark contrast to Linda's seductive aura, yet he couldn't deny that Linda's unwavering attention stirred something within him: confusion, temptation, or both. After the formalities, the live band shifted into an upbeat Afrobeat set. Guests trickled onto the dance floor, swaying to the lively rhythm. Under the glittering chandelier, Tunde was whisked away into business conversations, while Aisha mingled with donors, ensuring they enjoyed themselves. Linda, biding her time, watched Tunde intently from a distance. She noticed how he politely dismissed the flirtations of other women, how he kept glancing at Aisha with admiration. A flare of jealousy twisted Linda's expression. She could sense Tunde's battle. There was a part of him that remained resolute in devotion to Aisha, but Linda believed if she could just get him alone, she'd crack that resolve. Halfway through the evening, Linda spotted an opening. Tunde had stepped away from the crowd to answer a call from a business partner overseas. She followed him out to the hotel's terrace, where the lights from the distant city glowed like a sparkling tapestry. He ended the call as Linda approached, an expression of mild surprise gracing his face. "Linda, is everything okay?" he asked, pockets his phone. She stepped closer, the faint hum of music drifting from the ballroom. "I'm fine," she replied, letting her gaze linger on his broad shoulders. "I just needed some air." Tunde nodded, turning back toward the rail of the terrace to admire the city view. "Yeah, it's quite stuffy in there. Great event though." Linda moved beside him. Silence stretched between them. Finally, she spoke, her voice dropping low. "Tunde, you've been so kind these past weeks, talking to me, helping me with little things. I just wanted to say I appreciate you." He glanced at her, raising an eyebrow. "I appreciate you too, for everything you do for Aisha." Linda inhaled sharply, then continued, "Sometimes I wish life had dealt me different cards. Maybe I could have been with someone like you." Tunde stiffened, hearing the unmistakable insinuation. "Linda, you're my wife's best friend," he said, caution coloring his words. "Let's not." She placed a hand on his arm, her eyes misty with longing. "Please hear me out. You're the kind of man any woman would be lucky to have. Aisha is my best friend, yes, and I respect that, but my feelings are real." He tried to move away, but she stepped in front, her perfume enveloping him. "Linda, this isn't right," he said, struggling to maintain composure. Ignoring his protest, Linda leaned in, her breath hot against his ear. "Nobody has to know," she whispered. "I've heard the stories about you, your presence, your size," she added, letting the word hang. "I'm not blind to how women talk about you. Tell me you've never wondered if something else is out there, something different from the marriage you've become used to." For a moment, Tunde stood frozen, caught in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. That fraction of hesitation was all Linda needed. She pressed her lips to his in a quick yet electrifying kiss. Shocked, Tunde felt a sudden jolt shoot through his body, but his mind screamed for him to pull away. He did, staggering back, eyes wide with shock and guilt. Meanwhile, inside the ballroom, Aisha scanned the crowd, not seeing Tunde or Linda. A slight alarm flickered in her heart. She excused herself from the conversation and started searching. The night that was supposed to exemplify unity and generosity was on the brink of a devastating reveal. Out on the terrace, Tunde looked at Linda, speechless. Guilt gnawed at him. He was at a precipice. One misstep could ruin everything he and Aisha had built. But the boldness of Linda's pursuit fueled a primal part of him that, try as he might, he couldn't instantly quell. As Linda reached out to him again, footsteps sounded near the terrace door. Aisha's voice echoed, calling his name. Tunde jumped, turning towards the door like a startled child. In that tense breath, Linda quietly straightened her posture, a glint of triumph in her eyes. If Aisha had arrived a moment earlier, she might have witnessed more than a hasty kiss. Fate, it seemed, was orchestrating a slow unmasking of Linda's intentions. With her heart pounding, Linda turned to face the woman who had no idea how dangerously close her best friend was to stealing her husband, drawn, as Linda so fiercely believed, by the power of his rumored endowment and her own cunning. The terrace door swung open, revealing Aisha in her shimmering lace gown. She paused, taking in the sight of Tunde and Linda standing unusually close. Her eyes flicked between them, noticing Tunde's flushed face and Linda's composed, almost defiant posture. Although nothing overtly incriminating was happening at that exact second, an invisible cloud of tension weighed down the air. "Tunde, I've been looking everywhere for you," Aisha said, her voice tinged with relief. "The press wants some pictures. Are you okay? You look flustered." Tunde cleared his throat, trying to regain composure. "Yes, I'm fine," he said too quickly, brushing imaginary dust off his suit jacket. "Linda and I were just discussing some details about the event." Linda's face broke into a practiced smile. "Yes, we were talking about potential donors. I hope we didn't worry you, Aisha." Aisha's gaze lingered on them a moment longer, a strange suspicion flickering in her eyes. But she pushed it aside. Tonight was not the time to unravel. "All right," she said, gesturing toward the bustling ballroom. "We still have some big donors who'd like to meet you, Tunde." Then she looked at Linda. "And we should both get back to the guests." Inside, the speeches were winding down and the charity auction was about to begin. A famous auctioneer took the stage, ready to commence bidding on artwork, luxury vacations, and other items, the proceeds of which would go to the Children's Hospital Fund. Tunde and Aisha took their places at the head table, cameras flashing around them. Linda slipped in beside Aisha, exchanging polite small talk with the philanthropic crowd, yet she couldn't stop the self-satisfied grin from creeping onto her face. She had managed to steal a kiss from Tunde, and though his reaction wasn't fully encouraging, it wasn't a firm rejection either. Linda considered it a victory, a small crack in Tunde's armor. Throughout the auction, Tunde struggled to concentrate. His heart pounded with guilt. He and Aisha exchanged hushed words for the camera, forced smiles in front of donors, but behind the facade, Tunde's mind churned with inner turmoil. He was ashamed for allowing Linda to kiss him, ashamed he hadn't pushed her away immediately. But was it only shame he felt? A part of him couldn't deny the rush of adrenaline from her brazen act. He tried to rationalize that it was just an unexpected, stolen moment that wouldn't happen again. He told himself he was a faithful husband, that Linda's illusions would die if he simply cut off any further contact. The fundraiser ended on a successful note, over 200 million naira pledged, large checks written, and the media praising Aisha's organizational talent. Guests departed, congratulating the Adeyemis and leaving them with a sense of accomplishment. As the last wave of donors left, Tunde stepped onto the stage to deliver a final thank you. He commended everyone for their generosity and highlighted Aisha's leadership. Linda, watching from the front row, locked eyes with him momentarily, a secret glimmer in her gaze. Tunde faltered, just for a second, before finishing his speech. Back home, the euphoria of the event's success settled into weary silence. In their bedroom, Aisha removed her earrings and massaged her temples. "Can you believe how much we raised?" she said excitedly, glancing at Tunde who stood by the window, lost in thought. He turned, forcing a small smile. "It's amazing. I'm really proud of you." She stepped closer, resting a hand on his shoulder. "Is something bothering you? You've been distant tonight." For a moment, Tunde hesitated, contemplating whether to confess Linda's stolen kiss. But fear gripped him. He knew it would devastate Aisha and possibly break her trust. Instead, he offered a reassuring hug. "I'm just exhausted. Work, the event. It's a lot." Aisha accepted his explanation, though doubts still lingered in her eyes. They turned in for the night, each swirling in their own thoughts. Aisha's mind wandered back to the terrace moment. Linda's expression had held something she couldn't quite name. Linda lay awake that night in her plush Victoria Island apartment, replaying the fundraiser's finale over and over in her mind. She couldn't ignore the electric memory of Tunde's lips, however brief the stolen kiss had been. His initial recoil didn't faze her, If anything, it excited her more. Linda was sure she had caught a flicker of desire in his eyes. She believed all she needed was the right opportunity to make him hers. After all, she had already crossed a line that other women only dreamed about. The foundation of Tunde and Aisha's marriage had, in Linda's view, begun to crack. And that gave her a surge of power. The next day, Lagos came alive as it always did. Cars honking on the bustling streets, hawkers weaving through traffic with goods balanced on their heads, and corporate workers hustling to offices. In her own sleek SUV, Linda navigated through the chaos with confidence. She had an appointment with her hairdresser in Lekki and afterwards, planned to shop at a high-end boutique in search of the perfect ensemble. She wanted to look irresistible the next time she crossed paths with Tunde. Yet, Linda wasn't the only one with plans. Across town, Tunde sat in his glass-walled office at Adeyemi Holdings, going through acquisition documents. Despite the swirl of business, he couldn't escape thoughts of the previous night's transgression. He felt a nagging guilt that made it difficult to focus. He drummed his fingers on his polished mahogany desk and stared unseeing at the spreadsheet on his laptop. Did he owe Aisha the truth? The idea of confessing gripped him with dread. How would she react? He knew she'd be devastated. She'd feel betrayed not just by him but by her best friend, the woman she'd grown up trusting. In a surge of resolve, Tunde decided to curb Linda's advances once and for all. He picked up his phone and dialed her number, his heart pounding. When Linda answered, her tone was playful, almost as if she'd been expecting his call. "Tunde, to what do I owe the pleasure?" she purred. He exhaled sharply, keeping his voice firm. "We need to talk. This can't continue. I'm a married man, Linda. I love my wife." The pause. Then Linda gave a tinkling laugh that grazed Tunde's nerves. "Oh, Tunde, don't be so dramatic. It was just one kiss. Unless you're calling to tell me you want more?" He clenched his jaw. "I'm calling to tell you to stop. No more games. I don't want any misunderstandings between us." Linda sighed. "Fine," she said, but there was an undercurrent to her voice. "If that's what you want, I'll back off." Tunde hung up, feeling a surge of relief. He glanced at the wedding photograph on his desk, he and Aisha smiling so brightly on their special day. He hoped he had done the right thing to preserve what they had. Little did he know Linda had no intention of retreating. She had just decided to shift tactics. That evening, Linda arrived at her mother's home in Port Harcourt for a long-overdue visit. It was partly a tactical retreat. She wanted Tunde to miss her presence, if only slightly. She told herself that a brief absence would intensify the longing. Over a family dinner, Linda's mother noticed her daughter's distracted gaze. She asked if something was wrong, but Linda only smiled and shrugged. "Just business," she lied. No one in her family knew about her quest to snare Tunde. They assumed she was busy with philanthropic activities with Aisha. Meanwhile, back in Lagos, Aisha sensed a newfound calm in Tunde. He came home earlier than usual, joined her for dinner in the dining room, and actually asked about her day. She was pleasantly surprised. Even better, Linda seemed to have vanished. No phone calls, no surprise visits, no messages. Aisha felt a guilty wave of relief. As much as she loved Linda, the tension surrounding them had been palpable lately. Perhaps Linda had sensed the awkwardness and given them space. Whatever the reason, Aisha was grateful. Over the next week, Tunde poured his energy into mending his marriage. He whisked Aisha off on a surprise weekend getaway to a luxury resort in Ape. The couple spent time walking along the lagoon, tasting freshly caught seafood and talking, truly talking, for the first time in weeks. Aisha opened up about feeling sidelined during his expansions, and Tunde apologized, promising to be more present. In bed at night, they laughed over old memories, reconnected intimately, and for a fleeting moment, the specter of Linda vanished from Tunde's mind. Aisha believed, with all her heart, that they were finally returning to the harmony that had once defined their relationship. But the seeds of betrayal, once planted, seldom wither so easily. Linda returned to Lagos 2 weeks later, driving straight from the airport to her apartment. The city's familiar hustle greeted her like a companion, the neon lights reflecting off the dirty streets and tall glass buildings alike. She placed her suitcases in the bedroom and examined herself in the mirror, her braids now freshly done, her complexion glowing. This was the Linda that turned heads everywhere she went. She checked her phone, no messages from Tunde. The corner of her mouth twitched with annoyance. She dialed a friend in the event planning industry and set up a work meeting at a trendy lounge in Victoria Island, a place Tunde frequented for casual networking with business contacts. She reasoned that if Tunde saw her in a social setting, he might remember the allure of the kiss they shared, especially if he'd been lulled into a false sense of security by her supposed silence. Linda wasn't one to give up on something she believed was fated to be hers. Sure enough, the following evening, Tunde arrived at that very lounge to meet an old colleague visiting from London. The lounge was sleek, with low lighting, plush couches, and soft Afro house music pulsing in the background. As Tunde scanned the crowd, he froze when he saw Linda at the bar. She wore a figure-hugging black dress, sipping a cocktail with a group of acquaintances. Their eyes met. Tunde felt his stomach clench. Linda's mouth curved into a slow smile. She raised her glass in a mock toast. Tunde nodded stiffly, turning back to search for his colleague, heart hammering in his chest. He had told Linda to stay away, yet here she was. It might have been a coincidence. Lagos was vast, but the high society circle was surprisingly small, but Tunde suspected Linda had orchestrated this chance meeting. The rest of the evening, Tunde did his best to ignore Linda's presence. He chatted with his colleague, discussed the London business climate, and tried to seem unbothered. But every time he glanced in Linda's direction, he caught her staring back with a look that hinted, "I'm not done yet." When Tunde finally left the lounge, he felt more anxious than ever. He realized that perhaps telling Linda off over the phone wasn't enough to extinguish her obsession. Back at home, he sank into bed beside Aisha, who was already asleep. Her breathing was calm and steady, her face peaceful. Tunde closed his eyes, a swirl of conflicting emotions tightening in his chest. For all the success he'd gained, for all the wealth and admiration, he now found himself in a precarious situation that threatened to tear his world apart. In quiet desperation, he whispered a prayer, hoping for clarity, or at least the strength to stand by Aisha. But in the darkest corners of his mind, he knew Linda was far from finished. And whether he liked it or not, her next move might be even bolder, and infinitely more dangerous. 3 weeks later, a swirl of rumors began circulating in Lagos high society. Whispers emerged in the corridors of Adeyemi Holdings, in the powder rooms of upscale restaurants, and among members of Aisha's charity circles. People spoke in hushed tones about Linda and Tunde, how they were seen at the lounge that night, how Linda had discreetly visited Tunde's office, how she appeared at the same boardroom events despite having no direct link to Adeyemi Holdings. It was all speculation, but gossip in Lagos often carried a kernel of truth. Aisha, immersed in a new charitable project focused on girl-child education, started getting uncomfortable questions from acquaintances. They would ask casually, "I heard Linda is helping Tunde with some expansions? Have you been working together on that?" Or, "Is Linda now an official consultant for Adeyemi Holdings? She seems to be around there quite often." Aisha's confusion and embarrassment grew. She had no knowledge of Linda working with Tunde on anything official. The uneasy feeling in her chest returned, heavier this time. Finally, she decided to confront Tunde. One evening, as they settled in after dinner, she brought it up. "Tunde, I've been hearing strange talk about you and Linda. People say they see her at your office, at meetings that don't concern her." She paused, scanning his face. "Is there something going on?" Tunde frowned, genuinely perplexed. "Linda hasn't been to my office officially in weeks," he said. "I only ran into her at a lounge once." "That's it, Aisha. You know how people gossip." Aisha looked down at her hands. "I trust you. It's Linda I'm starting to doubt," she whispered. "You have to be careful. She's my best friend and I love her, but the rumors," her voice trailed off. Tunde nodded, leaning in to give her a reassuring hug. "I promise you there's nothing between Linda and me. Don't worry." He believed his own words in that moment, even if the memory of that kiss still loomed. He had resisted Linda's repeated attempts. Surely that meant the threat was diminishing. But Linda had other plans. She was growing impatient and decided to execute what she considered her checkmate. She invited Tunde to a private dinner at a luxurious penthouse restaurant, a place she knew many wealthy elites frequented, but also a spot with secluded VIP sections. Linda framed it as a potential investment pitch. "I have a wealthy friend from South Africa who's looking to invest in West African logistics," she told Tunde over the phone. "It could be a golden opportunity for Adeyemi Holdings. I'll set up a meeting." Though Tunde hesitated, the mention of potential investors piqued his interest. His business expansions were still ongoing, and he was under pressure to secure more funding. If Linda truly had a serious lead, ignoring it might jeopardize a lucrative opportunity. Reluctantly, he agreed to meet with her contact, but insisted it remain strictly professional. On the designated evening, Tunde arrived at the penthouse restaurant, stepping off a private elevator that opened into a dimly lit foyer with plush carpeting. A hostess guided him to a secluded booth where Linda awaited him alone. She stood when he approached, dressed in a subtly provocative outfit, a fitted, sleek trouser suit that accentuated her figure while still appearing somewhat businesslike. The lighting softened the lines of her face, and her hair was styled in a chic updo that emphasized her regal neck. Tunde's first question was direct. "Where's the investor?" Linda feigned regret, pressing a hand lightly against her chest. "He canceled last minute. Family emergency, apparently. I'm sorry, I found out too late to let you know. But since you're here," she gestured toward the empty chairs, "let's at least have dinner and discuss potential strategies." Tunde stiffened, aware that this smelled like a setup. But a part of him hoped maybe Linda really did have some leads, so he decided to stay. He took a seat, leaving an intentional gap between them. A waiter appeared, serving sparkling water and an amuse-bouche. The city lights glittered through floor-to-ceiling windows, revealing a stunning view of Lagos at night. For the first 30 minutes, Linda stuck to business talk, flipping through slides on her tablet that outlined hypothetical investment scenarios. Tunde relaxed marginally, maybe she had turned a new leaf. But then, as the dinner progressed, Linda changed the subject. She leaned forward, her voice turning sultry. "Do you remember that night on the terrace, Tunde?" she asked, eyes locked on his. "Because I think about it all the time." He placed his cutlery down, meeting her gaze. "Linda, we agreed. That was a mistake." She reached out, touching his hand. "But was it really? Didn't you feel something?" A slight tremor laced her words. "I know you're trying to do the right thing, but I also know you're not indifferent to me. Let me make this easier. I'm not asking you to leave Aisha. I'm asking you to consider more. You're a man, Tunde, and I'm a woman who appreciates you. We can keep this discreet." Tunde's heartbeat thundered in his ears. He swallowed hard, tugging his hand away. "I love my wife, Linda. I won't do this. We're done here." He stood abruptly. Linda's expression darkened, shifting from seductive to something far more calculating. She followed suit, stepping in front of him, blocking his exit. "Let me show you something," she hissed, pulling out her phone. With a few taps, she revealed a photo gallery. Tunde's blood ran cold. There, on her screen, he saw a series of pictures, grainy but unmistakable. Images of him and Linda kissing on the terrace after the fundraiser. Another angle showed him from behind, Linda's hands gripping his suit lapels, her lips on his. Tunde's face was visible in one shot, a stunned expression that could be interpreted as anything by a casual observer. "I had someone capture that moment," Linda confessed, her voice low. "You think I'm some naive girl chasing a married man? I'm smarter than that, Tunde." She slid her phone back into her purse. "Unless you give me what I want, I will send these photos to every media outlet in Lagos. I wonder what the tabloids will say. Or your business partners. Or even Aisha's father, the senator." Tunde's chest tightened with panic and anger. "You're blackmailing me?" She shrugged, unrepentant. "Call it whatever you want. But I'm prepared to leverage any advantage I have. I told you I don't need all of your attention, just enough to make me feel special. We can meet once in a while, away from prying eyes. And if you treat me right, these photos disappear forever." Tunde's mind spun. He couldn't imagine Aisha's reaction if she saw those images. She would never believe the kiss was forced. She'd see him as the ultimate betrayer, and Linda as yet another predator, leaving the marriage in tatters. His reputation as a successful CEO might survive a scandal. Money had a way of cushioning fallout, but it would devastate Aisha's philanthropic standing, her emotional well-being, and everything they had built together. Linda placed a manicured hand on Tunde's chest, sliding it slowly downward. "You have one day to think about my offer," she said, her voice dangerously soft. "I'll be waiting for your decision." Tunde wanted to rage, to shout at her, to storm away and expose her manipulations. But he stood there, momentarily powerless, his world spinning at the precipice of ruin. How had it come to this? He, a self-made millionaire CEO, cornered by the cunning best friend of his beloved wife, all because of a single moment of weakness and a rumor about his physical endowment that he'd never even exploited for personal gain. In a state of mental turmoil, Tunde pushed past Linda and left the penthouse restaurant, ignoring her parting words that echoed behind him like a haunting refrain. Driving home through the nightlit streets, he knew that whatever choice he made next would change the trajectory of his life and marriage forever. Would he succumb to Linda's blackmail, effectively becoming her puppet? Or would he risk losing everything, love, trust, respect, by exposing her first? He couldn't see a clear path, and in the swirling darkness of Lagos traffic, it seemed the city's harsh neon lights and roaring cars were the only witnesses to the storm raging inside him. Little did he know that, come morning, a shocking twist would upend all of Linda's carefully laid plans, and reveal just how fragile a grip she truly had on his life. The end. If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing heartwarming stories almost every day. We are very grateful for your support. See you soon.